Hi everybody, my name is Ashley Lamelli, and this is my mini lesson plan for Nathaniel Hawthorne's short story titled The Birthmark. I anticipate this lesson will be taught to college freshmen, since I anticipate on teaching community college. And I anticipate that this will be in Intro to Literature class, so students from various majors and backgrounds and various levels of reading. I do have the Common Core in mind. The standard that I'm using is the reading standards for literature. I'm using grade 12 in this case, since this is going to be a college course. I would assume, I guess, that they're coming from this. So that one says, cite strong and thoughtful textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text, including determining where the text leaves matters uncertain. So my focus mainly is going to be on, since my anticipated field is rhetoric and composition, or teaching freshman writing, I would be using this lesson as a way of teaching students how to find good textual evidence for like research or into pre-writing or brainstorming for maybe a literary essay that they would have in the future. So it will have a writing kind of ending to it, applicability for homework, but this is going to be the lesson. So students will have read the short story, The Birthmark, by the time they get to class. And I will send them a link that has a short biography of Nathaniel Hawthorne beforehand, so that they can get a sense of when this story was written and who its intended audience was. So the key ideas, we're going to be talking about themes and obviously textual evidence. So when students walk in, I will kind of build on, in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, build on like the knowledge level and basic reading comprehension, and kind of bringing the memory of the story to the forefront. So I'll be asking things like, what do you guys think of the story? Trying to engage in some basic conversation levels and conversation level engagement, and saying, so what did you guys think of the story? Did anything stand out to you? And then once everyone's kind of on track, then I'll say, okay, I'll have the board and I'll say, let's get all these main characters down. Who were the main characters? So I have an iPad here of basically what I would be writing on the board, since I don't have access to a board. This is basically what that would look like, if you can see that. So I would write the main characters on the top. And so there are three main characters in Hawthorne's story. You have Aylmer, who is the husband, Georgiana, who is the wife, and Aminadab, who is the helper of Aylmer, who is a scientist. So it's kind of, I guess quite technically, it's kind of like his servant, because he doesn't quite speak in the story. So in the story, some of his characteristics, or one of the questions that I would be asking is, so what do we know about these characters? What are some unique characteristics about them? Oh, well, okay, Aylmer is the husband. Okay, what does he do in the story? Well, he's a scientist, but he's also a philosopher and kind of a sorcerer. So he taps into nature and supernature, and sometimes kind of magic and potions and alchemy to get these, to get the solution for the story. So we have any traits about him is that he's obsessive. So I don't know if you can see this too well, but I am going to repeat these as I go along. So he's obsessive, he's a perfectionist, he's greedy. You know, I would get all these things from the students themselves and say, so okay, what else? What about his ambition stands out to you? Is it just ambition? Is he just driven? Or is it even more than that? You know, I would ask guided questions to encourage critical thinking. And then Georgiana, or maybe not critical thinking, but at this point, at least recollection. Georgiana, the wife, she is good looking, but she has this birthmark on her face that Aylmer, her husband, considers a flaw. And some people, there's a note in there that some people think it's beautiful, some people think it's ugly. So there's kind of mixed feelings on this. But she loves her husband, and since they have just recently gotten married, she wants to make him happy. So he says that he will use his wisdom and knowledge to get rid of the birthmark. And Aminadab is the third character in the story. He's Aylmer's helper. He loves Georgiana. There is a sentence. So I would use guided questions, say like, so did Aylmer say anything about Georgiana? How does he feel about Georgiana? Because there is a line where he says that if she was my wife, I would just love her how she is. And then there are some comments that, you know, maybe he's not quite human, because in the story it says that he doesn't really speak. It's more like he grunts, and Aylmer kind of refers to him as like a buffoon, kind of. So, but because of that line, we also see that he's envious over here. So those are some basic things about the story that we're getting kind of the shape of the story of who the characters are. Next, I would ask, so what were the main events of the story? So these are just some key points that have been covered. I would ask, so what happened in the beginning? What was another key point? And I'd probably gather, kind of direct students, say, if they say something that's not a major detail, I'd probably guide them a little bit. Okay, so what happened after that? And I guess I would be a little bit selective in what I would write on the board or what I would type onto a document that's projected onto the screen, something like that. But that's how I would guide the discussion in that case, so that if students are pointing out all these maybe like minor details, because we only want the major key points. So key points here that Aylmer tells Georgiana that his wife's birthmark is a flaw. Aminadab says he would love Georgiana as she is. Aylmer tries to get rid of the birthmark with magic and science. Many attempts fail, and the last attempt puts Georgiana into a deep slumber. Aylmer kisses the birthmark, though he is disgusted by it, and then Georgiana wakes for a minute, but then she dies. So there's a lot of commentary in there, but those are the key events of the story. So the part where I would get students into thinking, or get to literary thinking, would be to ask, so what are the key ideas? So I would say key ideas, but I'm talking about themes. What are the key ideas or themes that are in the story? And I would get comments from students, okay? Maybe one of the themes is Aylmer was obsessive because he was a perfectionist and he was greedy and he wanted control and things like that. So I have a list of themes here that I would collect from the students. Depending on how engaging they are, I might also have just kind of like an image pulled up of a list of different themes, so as to get the ball rolling. If some of them are having a hard time thinking, and I would kind of, if they would point out one like, oh, I think creation or mimicking creation might be a theme. Okay, so why would that be? And just kind of get students right now based off of what they remember from the story, what feelings they were impacted with when they read the story. And then once we have all these themes, I would assign students in groups of 4. So we would have some group work of 4 groups of students. I anticipate probably 5 or 6 groups, but each group would have to vote on a theme that they would want to talk about. So I would preface it in this case. I said, okay, students, we're going to be looking for textual evidence. We're going to look in the story. So you'll have, hopefully they'll have printed copies, or I will have provided printed copies for them, depending on the politics of the finances in the school. So off track. But so they would be gathering sentences and passages from the actual text, from Hawthorne's The Birthmark, to see what passages actually support the existence of that theme. If creation is one of the themes, what sentences support that? And at the end, they'll have to come up with one sentence that kind of supports or specifies what exactly, how that theme is portrayed in the story. Like if it's creation, is it that mimicking creation is bad? If it's obsession, is it that obsession can never lead to anything good? And how does that connect to the story? So I have an example of group work that, so each group would be assigned their theme, or they would pick their theme depending on how engaging they are. And I would assign 10 to 15 minutes for each student, or for each group, to pull at least 3, or I guess as many as they can, passages or sentences from the text to support their theme and how that connects to that. So that would be small group discussion, and then when they were done in 10 to 15 minutes, I would say, all right, so time's up. And I would get to the front of the classroom, and I would have the group numbers and then the themes that they've been assigned or that they've chosen, and I would have them read aloud to me. So, okay, one representative in the group, read the first quote that you have that supports this theme of nature. And then they would read the quote, and I would say, if it wasn't I would ask them, okay, so maybe you or the representative of the group or another student in the group, explain to me how this quote is connected to this theme. So that would be exercising the analysis of the quote. So after the analysis of this quote, I would switch between groups. Each group would read me their quote and aloud, and all the students would be able to hear the support for that quote to that theme. So if someone's talking about, if their theme is obsession, and they're talking about the quote where Aylmer looked pale and sickly when he was creating the last potion to try for Georgiana's birthmark, it was like he sacrificed his own health because of this obsession, this thing that he's prioritized. So, maybe that's for the theme obsession, maybe that's for the theme sacrifice, but either way, they would have to support that in the classroom. Now, in the end, where this would all tie in together, so in the last 5 or 10 minutes of class or so, I would begin to assign sort of a short essay that they would be bringing to class, so maybe like 3-4 pages of how to write so they would, at the end of this, they would have to have some sort of sentence that describes exactly how this theme is represented in the story. So it's obviously not just the keyword obsession, but like Nathaniel Hawthorne's short story, The Birthmark, portrays the theme of obsession by doing this and that with the characters or something. So they would have to have some sort of statement like that, and then per their group, they would use those quotes to write a short essay that would bring probably in the next 2 classes, or over the weekend. I'm not sure about the technicalities of that, but so that would be using using textual analysis of what they've been finding in the text to support an opinion or an assumption or a perception of this overarching theme, this overarching or like an underlying current of truth that kind of goes throughout the story. So that would tie into a short essay afterwards. So it'd be also teaching them how to use textual evidence, in this case in a literary essay, not exactly a research paper because we're not using secondary sources here, we're just looking at the text. So it would take, probably the next class would introduce something like, so you guys have your quotes now. This is how we would introduce a quote, have the quote itself, and this is how we would analyze that quote within a paragraph. So that way you're not just making your assumption and your topic sentence, your mini thesis statement. You're actually introducing why this quote connects, and then inserting the actual quote, and then analyzing that right afterwards, just like we did in the discussion. So that's what it would lead toward, is learning how to condense these ideas into a written form, but learning how to create the experience of making these connections in the text and overarching themes of whatever themes can be applied to something else, or to another story, or to a movie, or to a book, and they'll be able to carry that kind of practice, that experiential practice. So that in that case, that discussion will be using the Bloom's taxonomy of analysis, whereas we started with knowledge kind of at the bottom of the pyramid, and then moving up towards critical analysis of deducing what actually these the inferences that can be made from the text, thinking critically about the text. And yeah, so hopefully that would lead to a written project, because I think that would be the best, at least for a literature class, the best way of displaying that comprehension of concepts, not just comprehension of the text. Yeah, so that's my mini lesson. So in short, that would involve kind of bringing up the knowledge in kind of conversational style. What stood out to you? What were the key points? Who were the main characters? Moving on to, so what themes did we see in the story? Then the activity of what textual evidence tells us that these themes are present in the story, and then discussing how those themes actually are supported by this textual evidence, and then into hopefully leading into homework of a written project. That's just a short essay, and yeah, that would the discussion would be engaging in critical thinking. And again, this is aimed at college level, intro to literature, freshmen, or community college level students, returning students, whatever it is. So yeah, that's my mini lesson. Thank you.